His name was Albert. Written by Richard Jordan. Edward, the blue engine, had returned home from the works. He had broken a crank pin, braving a terrible storm, but had been preserved and got his passengers home safely. News of his courage soon spread, but instead of feeling proud, Edward was sad, and no one knew why. One day, Boco was helping Edward in the yards. Edward, usually quite open to conversation, appeared preoccupied. Boco was worried about Edward and feared he was still hurting from his accident. "Is it your crank pins, Edward?" he asked. "No, I feel well, Boco," Edward said. "What's the matter then?" replied Boco. "You seemed 1,000 miles away since you've come home." Edward looked down at his buffers. "I realized something after my accident, Boco," he began. "All I could think about was, why me?" "Whatever do you mean?" Boco asked. "Isn't it amazing that an engine as old as I can be mended and continue on as if the years didn't matter? On my old railway, when we were young, we never dreamed of aching axles or struggling up hills. We just did it. I think all about my friends who never got a chance to live a life as long as mine. I'm sure they're all scrapped by now." Boco understood. "And you feel guilty for it?" he asked. "Yes. Some of my friends never even got a chance," Edward agreed. "But why did I? I only wish that I could see just one of them, to know that one of them made it. It would make this old engine's heart feel better." "What were their names?" asked Boco. "There was William, and Frank, and Pettigrew, and of course, but then there was my best friend. His name was Albert." The old engine's face lit up as he reminisced. "It was a different time, slower. We weren't in such a rush to get everywhere, but it was a time of change too. Many of the very old engines were retiring, and new engines like Albert and I were being built. Albert pulled the lighter local trains while I pulled the express. The other big engines wanted to prove their worth and rode like wild horses. The coaches didn't like them, but they did like Albert and me because we took our time and did things right. Then again, Albert was immensely likable. He was popular with the big and small engines alike, and even the trucks adored him. The coaches sang songs when they were out with him, and it was said that fussy babies fell asleep as he rode so smoothly. But as I said, times were changing, and the railway had switched ownership during a very rough patch. But there was a bigger problem looming over the horizon. Many railways were merging across the mainland, and there were rumors of a mass consolidation in the future. Tensions were rising, and we were afraid. Albert, however, was always the voice of reason. "We've gotten up through rough spots before," he would say. "As long as we stick together, it doesn't matter where we go." But one winter, my driver came to the sheds with news. "A gentleman from the island of Sodor has asked for an able-bodied engine to help with the construction of a new railway. Our controller has agreed to send you on loan." We were to leave the next day. I didn't want to, but our controller insisted. I wanted to say goodbye to Albert, who was due back with his train, but he never came home. Edward paused.
What happened to him?
Boco asked. They said he was in a terrible accident. A terrible one. And no one ever spoke about it again. As I became settled here, it became evident that the Fat Controller needed me to stay, and so I did. I never returned to my old railway. Soon, I was told that the railway that had been merged with a larger line. My old line didn't exist anymore the same way it did, and many of the engines had been sent elsewhere. Or worse. I suppose I'm lucky. I avoided all that, and I've been very happy here. I don't know what happened to Albert, but I think about him from time, especially after my accident. Why such a sweet, caring, and hard-working engine left behind while I came here? Boco didn't know what to say. He felt sorry for Edward the Blue Engine. The conversation fell into silence, and the engines finished their work and went to the sheds, and nothing more was said. The next day, Boco was at the harbor. He saw the Fat Controller at the station platform. He was speaking to the yard foreman. As the foreman walked away, Boco gave a toot on his horn and pulled up alongside.
Hello, Boco. Busy with the clay, I see. Sir Topham Hatt smiled warmly. Yes, sure. The work has been difficult for another reason, he said, and told him about Edward. It's normal for an engine like Edward to feel that way, said the Fat Controller. He came here during a time of great transition. I'm not sure what happened to his friends, or Albert for that matter. I wish there was something we could do.
Boco frowned. The Fat Controller smiled.
What a small world we live in, he began. I just got off the phone with an old friend. He is the grandson of the gentleman who owned Edward's old railway. He mentioned something about an old tank engine.
Weeks later, Edward was still feeling down. Boco found him in the sheds.
The Fat Controller needs you at the harbor station right away, he said. It's an emergency.
Of course, Edward said, and he rocketed down the line as fast as his wheels would let him. When he arrived at the harbor, he stopped in his tracks. Albert? Edward said in shock. Albert's kind face, now wrinkled with age, looked up at the blue engine. Blue suits you, he chuckled. You were never one for red, too even-tempered. What happened to you? I tried to say goodbye, but was told that you were in a terrible accident. It wasn't that terrible. You know how Pettigrew's tendency for spinning a tall tale. I was impatient at the signal before the tunnel. I blew steam and created an avalanche. I was stuck, but my guard dug me out, and I was sent to the works just in case, and a gentleman offered to buy me to work on his line. I was one of the lucky ones. Edward was speechless. All he could do was smile, tears welling in his eyes, happy to be reunited with his friend. The Fat Controller decided to purchase Albert, and soon he and Edward were puffing up and down the branch line with their coaches in tow. To Boco, Edward seemed like a young engine again, going to and fro with spring in his steps. Edward no longer had to ask why me, because somehow, by some stroke of luck, the world had heard him, and had taken a chance on a little tank engine called Albert.